You've been told that if you just try harder, care more, fix everything around you, then life will finally feel okay. That peace will come when everything goes your way. But what if that's the biggest lie of all? What if trying to control everything is the very thing making you exhausted, anxious, and stuck? Because no matter how hard you try, some things won't change. People leave, plans fall apart. The past doesn't rewrite itself just because you wish it would. And yet, you keep fighting reality like it's your enemy. Like accepting it means giving up. But here's the truth no one told you. Acceptance isn't weakness, it's freedom. It's the quiet power of saying, I don't like this, but I will not let it destroy me. It's choosing peace even when life doesn't play fair. And tonight, you're going to feel that shift. You're going to learn how to let go, not because it's easy, but because holding on is breaking you. Through teachings from ancient wisdom, modern science, and the quiet strength of those who've walked through fire and found peace on the other side, you'll begin to feel something you may not have felt in a long time: relief. Your breath will slow, the war in your head will start to quiet, and when morning comes, you won't wake up drowning in resistance, you'll wake up floating. This isn't just something to help you sleep. This is the beginning of a lighter life. Are you ready? Let's begin. Most people never realize it, but the tightness in your chest, the racing thoughts, the tension that refuses to leave your shoulders, it's not just stress, it's resistance. Resistance to what is. A silent war between how you want life to be and how it actually is. And the brain, it's caught in the middle. Every time you hold on to control, try to fix the unfixable, or wish things were different, your mind and body suffer. But when you learn to surrender, not give up, but let go, something changes deep inside. Not just emotionally, but physically, chemically, neurologically. You don't just feel better, you actually become better. Surrender isn't an act of failure, it's a shift in your biology. When you stop resisting life and start accepting it, your brain begins to heal. And not in theory, in practice, in your cells, in your nervous system. Letting go is something your body understands long before your mind does. And the science behind it will surprise you. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on what you focus on and how you respond to the world. This is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change its structure and function over time. But here's what they don't always tell you. Chronic stress, fear, and resistance shrink that ability. When you're stuck in survival mode, your brain becomes rigid. You stop learning, you stop growing. Your reactions become automatic, impulsive. You're not thinking, you're defending. The brain prioritizes defense over development. And as long as you're clinging to what can't be controlled, you're reinforcing the very circuits that keep you anxious, reactive, and emotionally exhausted. Letting go flips that entire script. When you accept what is, even if it hurts, even if you hate it, signal to your nervous system that the threat has passed, that it, 39, safe to stop fighting. And when safety returns, so does growth. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, empathy, and emotional regulation, lights back up. It re-engages. New neural pathways begin to form. You're not stuck anymore. You, 39, re-evolving. That shift doesn't happen through effort. It happens through release. When you finally stop forcing, pushing, clenching, your brain switches from survival to repair. The parasympathetic nervous system takes over the rest and digest system. Heart rate slows, muscles soften, cortisol, your main stress hormone, starts to drop, and in its place, oxytocin and serotonin begin to rise, chemicals linked to connection, peace, and emotional balance. The most powerful thing about surrender is how quietly it heals you. You may not notice it at first. You'll just realize one day that you're not overthinking like before, that your body isn't bracing all the time, that you can sit with discomfort without needing to run from it. That's the brain returning to balance. The hippocampus, the region of your brain involved in memory and emotional learning, begins to function more clearly when stress is reduced. People often say that when they let go of resentment or grief, they remember things more vividly or feel more present in their daily life. That's not a coincidence. Chronic resistance muddies your emotional memory. Acceptance clarifies it. But it goes deeper. Letting go also activates parts of the brain connected to creativity. When your energy isn't being spent on suppressing emotion or trying to force outcomes, it becomes available for insight, curiosity, and new ways of thinking. That's why people who finally surrender often feel inspired afterward, not because life suddenly got easier, but because their brains were freed from inner war. And with that space, new solutions start to appear. What's fascinating is that the brain doesn't need the problem to change. It needs your relationship to the problem to change. Acceptance does that. It's not about pretending everything is okay. It's about recognizing that even if it's not, you can stop resisting it. You can stop feeding the loop of tension and control. And in doing that, the emotional charge around the issue starts to fade. Not instantly, but steadily. This is where long-term emotional health begins to build. When you practice acceptance regularly, even in the small, ordinary moments, a delay, a disagreement, a disappointment, you train your brain to tolerate discomfort without panic. This builds resilience. Not the hard kind that grits its teeth, but the soft kind that bends without breaking. The kind that knows, I can feel this, and it won't destroy me. Resilience is less about strength and more about flexibility. The brain becomes more emotionally agile, the more it learns to let go. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop gripping. Caring without clinging, feeling without drowning. And when you master that, your emotional baseline shifts. You stop riding the roller coaster of highs and lows. You begin to live in what psychologists call adaptive regulation. You still feel, but you're not thrown off course every time life turns. Acceptance also improves interpersonal relationships, and not just emotionally, but neurologically. Mirror neurons, the brain cells that allow you to feel empathy, function better when the nervous system is calm. That means when you, 39, are not in a state of resistance, you're more capable of understanding others. You're less reactive, less defensive. Conversations go deeper. Conflicts de-escalate faster. And instead of trying to fix or control people, you start meeting them where they are. Because that's what you're doing for yourself, too. What happens next is almost paradoxical. The more you let go, the more influence you actually gain. Not over others, but over your own life. When your internal state isn't being hijacked by chaos or the need for control, you start making better decisions. Clearer ones. You start living intentionally rather than reactively. This is where peace comes from. Not from avoiding pain, but from becoming someone who doesn't fear it. Your body starts to follow this rhythm too. Studies have shown that chronic stress and resistance can increase inflammation, weaken the immune system, and even alter your gut microbiome. But practices linked to acceptance like breathwork, mindfulness, and reflective rest reduce systemic inflammation. They increase heart rate variability, which is a strong marker of emotional regulation, overall health. People who accept their emotions rather than fight them recover faster from illness. They sleep better, they digest better, they age slower. Letting go doesn't mean everything gets easier. It means you stop making it harder. It means your brain stops bracing against a life that's already happening. And when you do that, when you really surrender, you stop living in resistance and you start living in response. That is where freedom begins. You might still face heartbreak, uncertainty, loss, but your brain won't treat every challenge like a crisis. It will know the difference. That's emotional intelligence at the neurological level. You begin to trust your ability to feel hard things and return to center. And here's something no one talks about. Surrender actually helps you learn faster, because when you're not defending yourself all the time, you can absorb new information more easily. You're more open, receptive, and the brain loves that. It rewards that openness by creating new synapses, new pathways. It treats surrender not as weakness, but as a green light for transformation. This is why people who embrace change, even painful change, tend to grow more in life. Their brains are literally more adaptable. They're not trapped in old beliefs, old patterns, old survival strategies. They evolve. So much of healing comes down to permission. And acceptance is how you give your brain that permission to rest, to release, to repair. It's not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, subtle, like rain softening dry earth. Over time, that softening becomes strength. You might still have thoughts that say, "I can't let this go." That's okay. Thoughts don't need to disappear. They just need space. When you let them be there without believing all of them, your brain doesn't grip them so tightly. You create distance. And in that distance, awareness grows. Acceptance gives you that awareness, and awareness rewires everything. The truth is, your brain isn't against you. It's just responding to how you treat your experience. If you treat everything like a threat, it will armor up. If you treat your experience, even the hard parts, with openness and curiosity, it will soften. It will support you. Letting go doesn't mean losing. It means shifting from control to connection, from fear to flow, from survival to presence. This isn't passive. This is the most active kind of peace you'll ever know. The kind you practice, moment by moment. The kind that doesn't need things to be perfect to feel okay. The kind that builds in your nervous system and becomes the ground you walk on. No one teaches us this when we're young. We're taught to fight, to win, to fix. But no one says, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop pushing. And so we burn out. We grip harder. We tell ourselves stories like, "I should have done more," or "if only things were different." But the moment you pause and say, "This is how it is right now, and I'll meet it with peace, not panic," something shifts. The story begins to unravel, not because you found all the answers, but because you stopped needing them. And that shift, that's where the brain starts to bloom. This is how peace grows, not from changing the world, but from changing how you meet it, from changing what you do with the parts you can't control. And surrender isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a new one where your energy is no longer wasted on resistance, but invested in renewal. Letting go gives you back to yourself. And once that happens, life doesn't 39T just get quieter. It gets clearer, sharper, truer. This is what your brain was made for, not control, but connection. not fear, but flow. Not resistance, but peace. Let it begin. The moment you stop resisting life as it is, something inside you begins to relax. That part of your mind that's been gripping, bracing, overthinking it slowly starts to quiet. And in that silence, something deeper begins to rise. Not just your own emotions, but feelings that have lived in you for longer than you've been aware. Patterns you didn't choose, fears that don't entirely feel like yours, behaviors that repeat like a script written generations ago. This is where acceptance meets something even more hidden, the pain you inherited. Not all burdens begin with you. Some were passed down in words, in silence, in how love was given or withheld. The unspoken rules, the pressure, the emotional weight that never seemed to have a clear source. This isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility, because the moment you become aware of what you've inherited, you get to decide what continues and what ends with you. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Studies in epigenetics show that trauma can actually be passed through generations, not just as stories or behaviors, but biologically. Stress responses, sensitivity to rejection, emotional shutdown. Sometimes the fear you feel in your body isn't 39 yours, but your mother's or her father's. This doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're carrying things that were never fully processed. And until they are seen, they will keep repeating. Awareness is the first step, not in a vague, mystical way, but in a real, grounded sense. You begin to notice patterns, the way you apologize, even when you haven't done anything wrong, the way you expect disappointment, even when things are going well, the way you feel responsible for other people's emotions, like their sadness is somehow your fault. These responses are often rooted in early survival, not necessarily from your life, but from the lives before yours. When parents carry unresolved pain, it often shows up as overprotection, emotional distance, perfectionism, or control. These aren't conscious choices. They're attempts to keep you safe, or more accurately, to keep themselves safe through you. Maybe your father couldn't express softness because his own vulnerability was punished. Maybe your mother tried to control everything because her childhood was full of chaos. Their wounds shaped their parenting, and their silence became your instruction. The hard part is that as children, we don't 39 just see these patterns, we internalize them. We build our self-image through their eyes. If love was conditional, we learn to earn it. If emotions were dangerous, we learn to hide them. And slowly, we inherit not just traits, but identities. The fixer, the strong one, the quiet one, the responsible one. These roles don't reflect your true self. They reflect your emotional inheritance. Acceptance begins when you stop blaming and start observing. Blaming your parents or grandparents may feel justified, but it doesn't heal. Observation does. When you can say, "This pain didn't start with me, but it lives in me," you step out of victimhood and into clarity. You stop passing the pain forward and begin meeting it with compassion. Compassion doesn't excuse harm. It simply understands it. It says, "I see why this pattern exists, and I choose to meet it with awareness instead of reaction." This is where true freedom starts, not by rewriting the past, but by refusing to repeat it. Repetition is the default of the unconscious mind. What isn't seen becomes destiny. That's why acceptance requires presence. Every time you pause and name the emotion instead of acting it out, You disrupt the inheritance. You interrupt the cycle. When you feel anger rising and choose not to lash out, you're not just controlling behavior, you're changing the emotional blueprint. That's powerful. This doesn't happen all at once. Emotional inheritance is layered. Some patterns are loud and obvious. Others are subtle, like a quiet shame that whispers you, 39, not enough. To work through them, you have to be patient, not passive patient. Because healing this kind of pain is not a single breakthrough. It, 39, age, long, steady relationship with truth. The nervous system plays a major role here. Inherited trauma often shows up as hypervigilance, always being on edge, waiting for something to go wrong, or as shut down, going numb in conflict, not knowing how to speak. These reactions aren't weakness. They're learned survival responses, passed down like stories etched into the nervous system. But just as they were learned, they can be unlearned. This is why practices like breathwork, grounding exercises, and somatic therapy are so effective. They speak the language of the body, where much of this emotional history lives. You can't think your way out of inherited trauma. You have to feel your way through it with safety, with support, and with slowness. Another layer of inherited pain is identity, the pressure to become someone you're not, to fulfill a dream that wasn't yours. Maybe your family expected you to succeed in a way that made their pain worthwhile. Maybe you were taught that being sensitive was a weakness, so you learned to harden. Maybe love was earned through achievement, not presence. These expectations shape your choices, your relationships, even your self-worth. And they're not always spoken. Often they live in silence, in what was never said but always felt. To break free, you have to question those expectations. Whose voice is driving your life? Whose approval are you still trying to win? Acceptance means releasing the need to become someone for someone else's peace. It means stepping out of inherited identity and into authenticity, even if that means being misunderstood. Misunderstanding is part of this process. When you stop playing the role your family assigned you, there will be discomfort. Some may see your healing as rejection. Some may call it selfishness. But choosing peace over pleasing is not selfish, it's honest. And honesty is the first form of true love, even when it's messy. You don't heal generational pain by confronting your family with anger. You heal it by confronting yourself with truth. By being willing to see the parts of you that were shaped in fear and choose not to act from them anymore. That's the work. That's the release. Sometimes that release feels like grief. You grieve the parents you wish you had, the childhood you didn't get, the nurturing that never came. This grief is real. It's not about blaming. It's about finally allowing the truth to be seen. Grieving what you didn't receive opens space to give it to yourself, maybe for the first time. Self-parenting is one of the most powerful tools in breaking generational cycles. When you start offering yourself the love, protection, and validation you never got, your brain begins to rewire. Your nervous system finds safety from within. And slowly, you stop outsourcing your worth to people who couldn't give it to you, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started seeing yourself clearly. There's also something important about forgiving the unspoken. Often, the pain wasn't in what was done, but in what was never acknowledged. The silence around mental health, the avoidance of real conversations, the lack of apology, the missing tenderness. You don't have to wait for others to admit the harm. You can name it, you can feel it, and you can choose to stop carrying it forward. This is the essence of ancestral healing. Not mystical rituals, although those can help, but practical, conscious decisions to face what previous generations couldn't, to feel what they had to suppress, to create space where they lived in survival. That is a legacy worth passing on. Legacy isn't just what you leave behind, it's what you no longer pass down. Every time you soothe your inner child instead of punishing them, you shift the future. Every time you say no to a pattern that once ruled you, you rewire your lineage. The beauty of this work is that it's invisible. No one will clap for you when you choose not to yell, not to shame, not to shut down, but the impact will echo in your relationships, in your children, if you have them, in the people you lead or love. You become the one who changed the direction. There's peace in knowing that your pain had a purpose, not because it was deserved, but because it gave you the insight to stop it from continuing. That kind of peace doesn't scream, it settles, it breathes. It lets you rest in your body like it's finally safe to be here. You don't need to understand every detail of your family's history to release the emotional weight. You just need to become conscious of what you're carrying and decide to lay it down. Every time you react differently, choose differently, feel differently, you are rewriting that history. Healing doesn't mean becoming perfect. It means becoming present. Present enough to feel what arises without needing to escape. Present enough to respond instead of repeat. Present enough to forgive, not for their sake, but for your own release. You're allowed to want more for yourself than what you came from. You're allowed to create a life that feels like home, even if the one you were raised in didn't. You're allowed to feel proud of your progress, even if no one else sees it. Because breaking inherited cycles is invisible work until it isn't. Until one day you look back and realize that burden isn't on your back anymore. And the silence that once held you hostage, it's now your quiet strength. That's how lineage transforms, not with noise, but with awareness, with love, with truth, with you. The moment you realize that some of what you've carried didn't begin with you, something softens. There's relief in knowing you can let go of pain that was never truly yours. But then, a different kind of heaviness begins to surface, the weight of time, the ache of things you didn't do, words you didn't say, chances you didn't take, the quiet echo of what could have been, not from someone else's story, but from your own. You start to wonder how different things might look if you had made a different choice, left sooner, spoken up, said yes, said no. That ache has a name. It, 39, called time-based trauma. The grief not of what happened, but of what never did. The version of your life that never got to unfold. And it hurts not because it's visible, but because it lingers quietly behind every what if. Regret is a silent companion. It shows up in moments of stillness. It hides in the pause between tasks, in the space before sleep. It, 39, not loud, but it's heavy, and it convinces you that you're too late, that you've missed your chance, that the time you lost defines the value of everything that comes next. But that's a lie, one that your nervous system believes until you teach it otherwise. The truth is, your past doesn't have to be your prison. Missed opportunities don't mean a wasted life. The human brain is hardwired to assign meaning to patterns. It fills in gaps. It imagines alternate endings. But what it doesn't always do well is forgive, especially when the regret is directed inward, especially when the pain feels self-inflicted. That's where acceptance becomes essential. Acceptance here doesn't mean pretending the past was perfect. It means facing what was real, without distorting it into something worse or idealizing it into something it never actually was. The brain, when stuck in regret, often edits the past. It makes it cleaner, simpler, or more tragic than it really was. That distortion becomes fuel for shame, and shame traps you in inaction. You don't move forward not because you don't want to, but because you feel you don't deserve to. Reframing wasted time starts with understanding how the brain processes perceived failure. The more emotional weight you attach to a missed opportunity, the more your brain replays it. This loop reinforces the belief that your life is broken, or worse, that you are. But what really happened is this: you made a choice with the information, emotional capacity, and self-awareness you had at that time. That version of you couldn't have done differently, not because you were flawed, but because you weren't ready. And readiness isn't always visible until you're on the other side of it. The pain of looking back is often amplified by the illusion that others got it right, that their path was linear, successful, clean. Social comparison adds another layer of suffering. You measure your internal timeline against someone else's external highlights. But timelines are not moral structures. There is no wrong age to grow, no wrong year to wake up, no deadline on healing. You are not late. You are arriving in your own time. Letting go of what could have been means giving yourself permission to mourn what didn't happen, without letting it poison what still can. It means realizing that grief and possibility can coexist. You can be sad about what you missed and still be open to what's next. These feelings don't cancel each other out, they expand you. The fear of lost time often hides a deeper fear, that you won't get another chance, that you've peaked, or plateaued, or failed too deeply to rise again. But neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to change and grow, doesn't expire. It responds not to age, but to presence. The more fully you show up now, the more your brain begins to open to new possibilities. You stop being defined by the past and start being shaped by the moment. People often think healing is about erasing the past, but true healing is about integrating it, letting it sit beside you without steering the wheel. When you stop resisting your history, it stops controlling you. You learn from it. You draw boundaries because of it. You make better choices through it. In this way, nothing is wasted, not even the darkest chapters. There is also wisdom in broken timelines. Detours often teach you what direct paths never could. The years you spent lost, stuck, confused, or in pain, those years softened your ego, deepened your compassion, clarified your values. They taught you what matters by showing you what doesn't. And, even if you wish it hadn't taken so long, there's power in knowing that you got here at all. Part of releasing time-based trauma is separating the event from the identity. A missed opportunity is something that happened. It is not who you are. Failure is something that occurred. It is not your character. When the mind fuses regret with self-worth, it builds a false identity. One that says, I'm the point kind of person who always messes up, who always gets it too late. That belief becomes a filter. You stop seeing possibility. You only see proof that you were right to feel ashamed. To break that pattern, you need evidence of the opposite. Small wins, new beginnings. Moments where you say yes to something now, even if it's small. The nervous system responds to consistency, not perfection. Every time you choose presence over punishment, it recalibrates. Your mind begins to trust you again. Your body feels safer in the now. Regret also tends to focus on control, the illusion that if you had just done one thing differently, everything would be better. But this ignores how many variables you never controlled. Other people's choices, the timing of events, the knowledge you didn't have access to, the emotional maturity that hadn't developed yet. When you zoom out, you see that life wasn't a straight line you failed to follow. It was a complex map you were never meant to fully understand. Letting go of what could have been doesn't mean you forget your past. It means you no longer let it define your capacity for joy, love, or meaning. It means you stop waiting to be caught up and start living where you are. It means choosing peace, not perfection. And peace doesn't ask you to erase your story only to hold it differently. One of the most effective ways to shift your relationship with the past is to reinterpret it through a compassionate lens, not with denial, but with depth. Ask yourself, what did I learn from what I didn't get? What strength was developed in the waiting? What clarity emerged from the disappointment? This isn't toxic positivity. It's emotional alchemy turning pain into perspective. The fear of wasting time can also make you grasp at urgency, rushing into things just to feel like you're not falling behind. But urgency is rarely rooted in intuition. It's often a trauma response. True clarity comes from stillness, not speed. When you slow down and accept where you are, you stop chasing life and start meeting it. Another key part of releasing time-based pain is detaching from idealized versions of your life. The version where you succeeded earlier, loved better, or avoided heartbreak. Those versions don't exist, not because you failed, but because they were based on assumptions, not reality. When you idealize a life that never happened, you reject the one that did. And the life you're in, no matter how imperfect, is still worthy of your attention. Your presence is the most powerful way to reclaim lost time, not by making up for it, but by refusing to lose any more of it by living in your head. Every time you return to your breath, your senses, your body, you reclaim a moment, and those moments, added together, become a life. Regret can be a teacher, but only if you let it speak without letting it scream. Its job is not to torment you. Its job is to show you what matters now, what still needs healing, what still calls for your attention. Once you've listened, you don't need to keep reliving the story. You can thank it and move forward. This forward movement isn't about drastic change, it's about alignment. Aligning your current actions with the values you wish you had honored sooner, speaking the truth you used to silence, setting boundaries you didn't know you needed, giving yourself grace in moments you once punished yourself for. That's how you honor the past, not by staying in it, but by letting it inform how you show up now. Sometimes it helps to visualize a younger version of yourself, the one who made those choices or avoided them. Speak to them the way you would to someone you love, not with judgment but with understanding. Tell them what they didn't know. Show them the compassion they didn't receive. Let them be seen so they can stop acting out through self-sabotage or fear. Time isn't just something you lose, it's also something you hold. You hold it in how you treat yourself, in how you forgive, in how you begin again. There are years ahead that can still feel rich, meaningful, and deeply aligned if you stop seeing the past as proof of what's not possible. There is a quiet strength in saying, I didn't know then, but I do now. That shift is everything. It opens the door to a future shaped not by shame, but by choice. You may never erase the ache of what didn't happen, but you can stop letting it steal your joy from what still can. You can learn to trust that there's still more life in front of you, and it doesn't need to look like anyone else's version of success. It just needs to be real. It just needs to be yours. This is how you reclaim time, not by chasing what's lost, but by choosing what's next. And that choice, it starts right here. There's a quiet power in facing the life you have, not the one you lost. That moment when you stop chasing a better past and start honoring the present becomes a turning point. But sometimes, instead of honoring what's here, we try to rise above it. We label discomfort as low vibration. We call pain an atgb.lo.com illusion, and we wrap avoidance in words that sound wise. It feels like progress, but something stays stuck. Not because we're doing too little, but because we're skipping the hard part, the honest part, the human part. That's not healing, that's bypassing. In today's world, there's a version of spirituality that promises peace without process, positivity without pain, clarity without confusion. It looks calm on the surface, but underneath, there's denial, avoidance, dressed up as enlightenment. This is what's known as spiritual bypassing, using spiritual ideas to avoid emotional growth. And it's more common than we admit. Spiritual bypassing often sounds like wisdom. It says things like, everything happens for a reason, or just stay high vibe when someone is grieving. It encourages forgiveness before there's been any real processing. It rushes to clarity when someone is still in the fog of shock. It offers mantras instead of presence. And although it's usually well-meaning, it leaves people feeling unseen, dismissed, and alone in their suffering. True acceptance doesn't skip pain. It sits with it. It listens. It lets the body shake, the voice break, the questions come. It holds space for discomfort without trying to clean it up too fast. There is nothing wrong with using spiritual tools, but when they are used to escape rather than explore, the deeper work gets blocked. Pain doesn't go away because it's ignored. It just goes underground, and from there, it controls you in quieter, more subtle ways. Avoidance can wear many masks. It might show up as constant meditation with no emotional reflection, as reading spiritual books but avoiding difficult conversations, as believing you're beyond triggers while your relationships keep falling apart. Growth doesn't mean you never get triggered. It means you know how to respond when you do. And that requires emotional honesty, not just elevated thoughts. One of the reasons spiritual bypassing is so seductive is because it promises quick relief. And after a lifetime of pain, who wouldn't want that? But peace built on avoidance is fragile. It crumbles the moment reality gets hard. True peace, the kind that lasts, is built by walking through discomfort, not around it. It's built by feeling grief fully, by facing regret honestly, by letting the truth be loud even when it's inconvenient. A big part of this work is learning to sit with contradictions. You can feel deep gratitude and still experience sadness. You can trust the process and still be angry about how it unfolded. You can believe in healing and still feel broken. None of these things cancel each other out. Holding multiple truths at once is a sign of maturity. The more you allow complexity, the more grounded your spirituality becomes. Embodied acceptance is different from concept-based understanding. You might know all the right words: surrender, presence, flow, but your body still tells the truth. If your jaw is tight, if your stomach sinks every time you think about a situation, if you find yourself mentally escaping hard conversations, there's something that hasn't been accepted yet. The body speaks before the mind does. And spiritual language won't override it. This is why somatic awareness is so important. To really accept life, you have to include the body in the process. Emotions are physiological. They move through breath, through sensation, through expression. If you try to bypass that and only work through the mind, your healing stays incomplete. You might look composed, but inside you're holding back tears that need to be cried, anger that needs to be felt, fear that needs to be named. There's no shame in bypassing. Everyone does it sometimes, especially in the beginning. The problem isn't that you avoided something, it's when you convince yourself you didn't. That's where the disconnection grows. Growth starts when you say, "I thought I healed this, but it still hurts." That humility opens the door to real transformation. And from that place, spiritual tools become supportive rather than suppressive. True acceptance requires staying present with what's uncomfortable, not fixing it right away, not trying to find a silver lining before the wound has been cleaned. Just staying, watching, listening, feeling. Over time, the nervous system learns that pain can be held without needing to run, that safety can exist even when the heart is heavy. This is how emotional resilience is built slowly, gently, truthfully. A major sign of bypassing is premature forgiveness, saying, "I forgive them," without having first acknowledged the depth of your pain. Forgiveness that skips grief becomes a performance. It doesn't free you. It pressures you to feel what you don't feel yet. Real forgiveness, when it comes, is not forced. It's a byproduct of healing, and healing takes time. It's not a straight path, and it's definitely not always peaceful. Some teachings say that pain is only the result of attachment. While there's some truth in that, it's not the whole picture. Pain is part of being human. Loss hurts because connection matters. Disappointment hurts because hope exists. Pretending these things shouldn't affect us doesn't make us evolved, it makes us disconnected. Detachment is not the same as disconnection. You can let go without numbing out. Spiritual bypassing can also lead to isolation. If you start believing that every struggle is a sign of low vibration or that suffering means you're not aligned, you begin to hide your pain from others. You withdraw. You pretend to be okay. But healing thrives in honesty, not image. And no one heals faster because they're pretending to be above their pain. Acceptance means you stop measuring your worth by how calm you appear. It means you allow messiness, setbacks, confusion, and contradiction, and you don't rush to fix any of it. You sit with your humanity. You breathe through it. You meet yourself where you are instead of where you think you should be. Another form of bypassing is over-relying on spiritual identity, becoming attached to being a healer, light worker, or empath in a way that creates separation rather than connection. When identity becomes a shield against doing the inner work, it creates a barrier. Labels don't heal you, practice does. Being open, being accountable, being real. Real spirituality isn't about being above the world, it's about being deeply in it, with all its discomfort and beauty. It's about staying when it's hard, loving when it's risky, grieving when it hurts. That kind of depth doesn't come from reading quotes. It comes from living through difficulty with your eyes open. This work also includes questioning your spiritual beliefs, not to abandon them, but to make sure they're rooted in truth, not escape. Ask yourself, am I using this belief to grow or to avoid? Is it helping me become more honest or more detached from reality? Is it deepening my compassion or making me judge others who are struggling? Compassion is a sign that spirituality is working, not how calm you are, not how perfect your practice looks, but how kind you become to yourself and to others. Bypassing makes you rigid. Real healing softens you. It makes you slower to judge, quicker to understand. It makes you safe for others to be real around. One of the deepest truths is that spiritual growth requires discomfort, not as punishment, but as a path. The parts of you that resist are the parts that are still protecting pain. The more you meet those parts with presence, the more they relax. Not because you told them to, but because you showed up with safety instead of shame. You don't have to let go of your practices. You just have to let go of using them to hide. Meditation, prayer, rituals, all of them are powerful, but they work best when you bring your full self to them, not just the polished parts, not just the ones that feel spiritual, but the raw, grieving, disappointed, and confused parts too. Acceptance is not passive. It's the most courageous act of being present with what is, without needing it to be different in order to love it. That kind of presence changes you. It teaches you to breathe through heartbreak, to stay with discomfort, to find peace not through avoidance, but through truth. The path to that peace is not always smooth. There will be moments you want to check out, to float above, to avoid. That's okay. The key is to notice when you're drifting and to come back to your breath, to your body, to this moment, to the part of you that's still learning to feel safe in the truth. You're not behind if you still struggle. You're not failing if it still hurts. You're human. And the more you honor that, the more real your healing becomes. There is no gold star for bypassing pain, but there is profound peace in walking through it, one honest step at a time. This is what acceptance really looks like. Not perfect, not polished, but whole. And that wholeness, that's what brings you home. The deeper you move into honest presence, the more you start to see how healing doesn't only happen in big, dramatic waves. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it happens in the smallest spaces. A pause before reacting, a breath before judging, a softening when the day doesn't go as planned. True. Acceptance is not just found in the heavy moments of heartbreak or deep inner work. It, 39, found in the broker end. Invisible choices you make dozens of times each day. The ones no one sees but you. And those are the choices that shape who you become. We tend to think of transformation as something grand, a spiritual breakthrough, a life-altering realization, a moment that changes everything. But identity is not rewritten in a single event. It's reshaped in small decisions. The way you talk to yourself when you, 39, rerunning late. The way you respond to someone who cuts you off. The way you breathe when your plans fall apart. These are micro moments, tiny points of friction that give you a chance to choose presence over pressure. And over time, they do something extraordinary. They shift your entire way of being. Micro-acceptance means recognizing these moments and learning how to meet them without resistance. Most people overlook them. They think they're too small to matter. But these are the places where your nervous system either tightens or relaxes, where your identity either contracts into reactivity or expands into awareness. It starts the moment your morning dozen, 39, go as expected. Maybe your alarm fails, your coffee spills, your inbox is full of things you didn't ask for. Your body gets tense, your thoughts race, your mood shifts. That's where the first opportunity appears. You could react out of habit, frustration, blame, urgency. Or you could pause. You could name what's happening. This is discomfort. This is not what I planned. And then breathe. That simple act doesn't fix the situation, but it softens your reaction to it. It keeps your energy from being hijacked. It tells your brain, this is not a threat. We don't have to go to war over this. That's a micro act of letting go, and your nervous system remembers. Identity is not just what you think of yourself. It, 39, what you practice becoming in repeated moments of tension. When you choose to not spiral over a minor inconvenience, you're not just calming your day. You're becoming someone who doesn't collapse in chaos. You're forming a new emotional baseline, one that allows more freedom, more choice, more trust in your own stability. These tiny decisions are easy to miss, especially in a world that glorifies constant reaction, notifications, opinions, delays, noise. But when you're intentional, even the mundane becomes a mirror. A slow line at the grocery store becomes a chance to observe your need for control. A rude comment becomes a moment to notice your urge to defend. These aren't tests to pass. They're invitations to respond differently. Each time you choose stillness over stress, curiosity over assumption, gentleness over urgency, you train your mind to respond with wisdom rather than instinct. And this training accumulates. It becomes who you are without needing to think about it. You stop identifying as the person who always reacts, always fixes, always rushes. You start knowing yourself as the one who can stay grounded even when things are off course. Some of the most powerful micro-acceptance practices begin in the body. The subtle way your shoulders rise when someone interrupts you, the way your jaw tightens when plans change, the shallow breath when you feel unseen. Noticing these responses and relaxing them even slightly sends signals of safety back to the brain. It rewires you for calm, not because the situation changed, but because your relationship to it did. Language also plays a part. The words you use in small frustrations shape how your brain interprets the world. When you say, "This always happens to me," you reinforce helplessness. When you say, "This is annoying, but I can handle it," you anchor into capability. Self-talk in minor stress builds emotional tone, and that tone becomes the emotional atmosphere you live in. Rejection is another daily moment that often goes unprocessed. Someone doesn't text back. You get overlooked. Your offer gets ignored. These seem minor, but they spark deep wiring. If unacknowledged, they fuel the belief that you're not wanted or valuable. But when you meet rejection with awareness, you unhook from that narrative. You say, "This stings, but it's not a definition, it's a moment," and you keep breathing through it. That builds resilience, not from defense, but from clarity. Micro-acceptance doesn't mean suppressing how you feel. It means letting yourself feel fully without being consumed by the feeling. You don't need to hide your frustration or pretend you're okay. You just need to not make your reaction the center of everything. You step back, observe it, and allow it. And that simple skill, the space between reaction and response, becomes one of your greatest sources of power. There's also deep value in letting go of outcomes, not just in major goals, but in tiny preferences. Wanting the day to go smoothly, hoping someone responds the way you planned, wishing others saw your effort. These little desires pile up, and when they aren't met, tension builds. But when you practice releasing your grip on the small stuff, you free up so much mental space. You're no longer drained by what you can't control. You become more flexible, more open to life as it unfolds. Micro-acceptance also changes how you interact with others. A friend cancels plans. A coworker doesn't follow through. Someone makes a careless remark. In these moments, your ego wants to react with blame, withdrawal, resentment. But if you pause, you'll notice the space between the trigger and the story you create. That space is where healing begins. You choose not to take it personally, not because it didn't affect you, but because you refuse to carry what isn't yours. That's quiet liberation. These small acts of letting go also teach your nervous system to trust. Trust that you don't need to control every variable to feel safe. Trust that you can face disappointment and stay intact. Trust that life can be imperfect and still be beautiful. This trust doesn't arrive all at once. It's built moment by moment in places most people overlook. Another layer of micro-acceptance is letting go of how things should feel. Maybe a moment of rest still feels anxious. Maybe a meditation doesn't bring peace. Maybe your joy is interrupted by guilt. Letting go of the expectation that healing feels good all the time is itself a deep act of healing. It allows the process to be real, not idealized. And in that reality, you find more stability. You can also practice acceptance in how you structure your time. When your to-do list stays unfinished, when your energy dips unexpectedly, when the day gets interrupted, these are all chances to meet yourself with compassion instead of criticism. Your productivity doesn't determine your worth. Your presence does. When you accept your limits, your rhythms, your pauses, you stop pushing against yourself. You start moving with your own life force. There's also the practice of accepting how others see you, especially in small misunderstandings. Someone misreads your tone, assumes your intent, overlooks your effort. These moments used to demand explanation, proof, correction. But now, you practice letting go of the need to be fully understood. You know who you are. You're learning to be okay with not controlling how you're seen. That's freedom in its quietest form. Micro-acceptance includes releasing the day as it ends, letting go of what didn't get done. What was said or unsaid? What could have gone better? Instead of replaying and rewriting, you say, "It happened. It's done." You let the day close without dragging it into tomorrow. That small release, done consistently, builds a mind that can rest, a body that can soften, a spirit that isn't carrying old weight. These daily acts of letting go are cumulative. They don't erase struggle, but they change your posture. Within it, you become less reactive, more rooted, less dependent on outcomes, more anchored in your response. You start to feel at home in yourself, not because life is smooth, but because you've stopped making every bump a battle. Over time, these moments become your practice. Not dramatic, not perfect, but real. They redefine what it means to be strong, not unshaken, but deeply responsive, not above life, but fully present. Within it, this is how your identity shifts, not by becoming someone else, but by consistently showing up as someone who chooses peace, even when it's inconvenient. This is the quiet revolution, the kind that doesn't announce itself but rewrites everything. And it begins in the smallest places, the ones within reach right now. Letting go in the small, everyday moments builds something quiet, but lasting, a different kind of strength, one not based on force, but on clarity. But even as you practice micro-acceptance, there's a deeper current underneath it all, a strong, often invisible pull that drives so many of your reactions, thoughts, and choices. It's the need to control. And the more you look at it, the more you start to see how much of your suffering comes not from what's happening, but from your resistance to not being in charge of it. Control is comforting. It gives a false sense of certainty, a temporary relief from the unknown. When things feel chaotic, control feels like safety, but it's not real safety, it's strategy. And behind that strategy is fear. The fear of being powerless, of being hurt again, of losing something important. So we tighten, we plan everything, we analyze every word, we try to manage how others see us, how our future unfolds, how every detail turns out. This feels smart at first, but eventually it becomes a cage. At the root of control is a belief that if I can just manage everything carefully enough, I won't have to feel pain. That belief is often formed early in life. Maybe when chaos in your environment made you feel unsafe. Maybe when someone let you down and you had to become the strong one. Or maybe when emotions felt too big and managing everything around you was the only way to stay grounded. Control wasn't born out of arrogance, it was born out of survival. But what once protected you is now preventing you from actually living. The mind is designed to look for patterns and solve problems. When it encounters uncertainty, it panics. It wants something to grab onto. Control gives it that temporary anchor, but that same anchor becomes a burden. Because the world will never fully match your plans. People will not always act the way you need them to. Life will not unfold according to your checklist. And the more you demand that it does, the more anxious you become. The more you chase perfection, the more unstable your peace becomes. This kind of control addiction isn't just mental, it's physiological. Your body becomes wired for tension. Your nervous system gets used to scanning for danger. You rehearse conversations before they happen, obsess over decisions after they're made, micromanage relationships until they collapse under the pressure. This doesn't make you broken. It means your system is confused, mistaking control for safety when what you actually need is trust. Trust doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing what you can, then releasing the outcome. It means staying open to what unfolds, even if it's not what you hoped. But to do that, you have to understand why your brain clings so tightly in the first place. Control is addictive because it offers predictability. It gives the illusion that if you do everything right, nothing will go wrong. That illusion is comforting, especially when you've experienced the opposite, when things did go wrong despite your best efforts. In those moments, the mind becomes more rigid. It decides that freedom is dangerous and control is the only way to stay safe. This is the birth of responsibility, feeling like everything depends on you. Over time, this pattern wears down your emotional system. You stop trusting others. You stop trusting time. You even stop trusting your own ability to respond if things fall apart. Control disconnects you from resilience. It's the opposite of presence. Because when you're trying to manage everything, you're not experiencing anything. You're in your head, forecasting, correcting, bracing. The process of unhooking from control begins with awareness, noticing the grip, noticing the thoughts. That spiral when something doesn't go as planned. Noticing how your body reacts when things feel out of reach. There's often a tightness in the chest, in the jaw, in the breath. That tightness is not just physical, it's emotional. It's the body saying, I'm not okay with this. That's where you start by listening to the grip instead of fighting it. You can ask yourself questions that bring clarity. What am I trying to prevent right now? What do I fear will happen if I don't control this? What emotion am I avoiding? Often the answers lead to deeper wounds. Fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of being seen as not enough. When you get to the root, you stop treating control like a personality trait and start seeing it as a protective habit. Another powerful practice is beginning to let go in controlled environments. Choosing not to overplan your day, letting someone else take the lead, allowing a conversation to unfold without preparing for every possibility. These seem small, but they retrain the nervous system. They teach your brain that uncertainty isn't fatal, that discomfort isn't danger, that you can survive not knowing. Learning to hold space for uncertainty is one of the most important skills you can develop. It gives you back your emotional bandwidth. Because control is exhausting, it's a constant performance. When you start releasing it, even slowly, you begin to reclaim energy, presence, spontaneity. You stop bracing for pain and start making space for life. Sometimes people think letting go of control means becoming passive. It doesn't. It means shifting from force to flow, from micromanaging to trusting your capacity to adapt. You still care. You still act. But you no longer assume that your safety depends on managing everything. You start building internal security instead of relying on external control. Another hidden layer of control is identity control, trying to curate how others see you. This creates anxiety around being misunderstood or rejected. You become hyper-aware of how you're perceived. You second-guess your words, hide your needs, shrink your truth. This is control in disguise, and it leads to disconnection from others and from your real self. Releasing identity control means allowing others to misread you sometimes. It means choosing self-honesty over approval. That doesn't mean being careless. It means being real, even when it risks not being liked. Because peace doesn't come from being seen as perfect, it comes from being free to be yourself fully. Letting go also means releasing outcomes. You do your best, but you stop needing a guaranteed result to feel okay. You stop needing things to go exactly your way. You stop tying your peace to performance. This gives you emotional flexibility. You adapt instead of collapse. You respond instead of react. You begin to trust that not getting what you wanted doesn't mean something is wrong. It means something else is unfolding. At the heart of all this is surrender. Not the kind that gives up, the kind that opens up. Surrender says, I'll meet life where it is, not just where I want it to be. That kind of openness builds real confidence, because you're no longer scared of being surprised. You're grounded in your ability to stay centered, no matter what arrives. Releasing control doesn't mean life gets easier. It means you stop making resistance your default. You stop trying to bend reality to your preferences. You start moving with it, listening to it, learning from it. And in that shift, you become lighter. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer carrying the pressure to fix it all. This is a long process. Sometimes you'll slip back into control. That's okay. The point isn't to never grip. It's to recognize the grip sooner, to release faster, to trust deeper. Each time you catch yourself and soften, your brain rewires a little more. Your nervous system finds more space. Your life becomes less about defense and more about depth. And slowly, the need to control starts to dissolve. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You stopped needing control to feel safe. You started building safety inside your own presence. That's where freedom lives. Not in control, but in clarity. Not in managing life, but in meeting it. As it is, as you are, without the grip, without the war. Just the breath, just the truth, just this moment. And that is enough. The moment you begin to loosen your grip on control, you start to experience life differently. You stop trying to shape every moment to fit your expectations and start noticing what has always been right in front of you. There, 39. A subtle shift, less tension, more noticing, less pushing, more observing. But to truly understand non-resistance, you don't need more theories. You need a mirror. And one of the clearest mirrors for this is the natural world. Not through poetry or metaphor, but through the raw, unfiltered way it exists, without judgment, without struggle, without the need to be anything other than what it is. Nature doesn't argue with itself. It doesn't resist change. It doesn't demand fairness. It simply moves. In rhythms, in cycles, in response to what is. The river doesn't punish the rock for being in its path. It flows around it. The tree doesn't hate the storm. It bends, it sheds, it regrows. This is not weakness. It's intelligence without resistance, strength without attachment. Nature has no need for control because it operates through presence, adaptability, and inherent trust in its own unfolding. This doesn't mean nature is gentle. It can be violent, unpredictable, destructive. But even its destruction holds purpose. A forest fire clears old growth to make way for new life. A volcanic eruption reshapes the land. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is forced. Nature never asks if it's too late or if it failed. It doesn't carry regret. It doesn't personalize weather. And in that, it teaches us one of the deepest lessons in acceptance, that things happen without needing our permission, and they keep happening even when we resist them. The human mind struggles with this. It wants fairness, it wants logic, it wants timelines and closure, guarantees. Nature offers none of these, and yet it thrives. Its indifference is not cruelty. It's clarity. It shows you how to live in alignment with what's real, rather than clinging to what you wish were true. And the more you study it, the more you start to understand that resistance is not necessary for survival. In fact, 39 often what gets in the way. Non-resistance does not mean passivity. It means acting from alignment instead of reactivity. Nature acts constantly. Seeds grow, tides shift, ecosystems evolve. But nothing is wasted on blame. Nothing is delayed by shame. You never see a flower rushing to bloom faster because it feels behind. You never see the moon apologizing for being dark. There is movement, but never panic. That steadiness teaches something important. Life does not need your control to move forward. It needs your attention, your awareness, your willingness to participate without trying to dominate. Natural rhythms are not just beautiful, they are deeply instructive. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. There is effort, and then there is rest. There is fullness, and then there is release. These cycles exist in your life too. You are not meant to always be producing, achieving, solving. There is time for expansion and time for contraction, time for clarity and time for confusion. Nature honors each phase without shame. So can you. There is also profound humility in how nature accepts what it cannot change. A tree doesn't fight Gravity. A mountain doesn't reject erosion. Even the most solid things slowly shift and reshape over time. When you resist change, you're not protecting yourself, you're separating yourself from the way life naturally works. And that separation creates suffering. It makes you feel like something is wrong just because something is changing. But when you see change as part of the rhythm, not a punishment, everything softens. Nature also teaches patience. Nothing meaningful grows overnight. The strongest roots are the slowest to form. The most lasting change happens beneath the surface. And yet, we rush. We want resolution before we've fully lived the experience. But healing has its own pace. Just like seasons don't skip steps, neither can you. If you, 39, in a winter, let it be winter. The soil is still doing its work, even when nothing blooms. Watching nature helps you reconnect with the intelligence of timing. You start to feel less urgency to fix and more willingness to witness. You understand that your emotions, like weather, come and go. You don't need to fight every storm. You can shelter, you can wait, you can let it pass, and it will. Because nothing in nature stays stuck. Even stillness is moving. There's also a deep lesson in how nature coexists with discomfort. Rocks don't try to smooth themselves. Outwater does that over time. Animals don't avoid pain. They respond, they adapt, and they rest. Trees continue to grow, even with broken branches. There's no story about how things should be, only a response to how things are. This is not detachment, it's presence. It's the wisdom of being fully in life, without needing it to be perfect to find peace in it. One of the most powerful forms of acceptance is learning to stop arguing with conditions. The weather doesn't ask for your opinion. The waves don't wait for your approval. In the same way, parts of life will unfold with or without your agreement. When you stop expecting the world to match your preferences, you begin to experience a deeper kind of peace, not because the world changed, but because your lens did. Judgment is another place where nature teaches gently but firmly. A leaf falls, a branch breaks, a bird flies away. These are not good or bad. They are just movement. In contrast, the human mind labels everything: success, failure, good, bad, worthy, not enough. And these labels create stress. They separate you from what is. But the more you observe nature, the more you realize that life simply moves, without punishment, without praise. And that neutrality, when practiced, becomes freedom. Learning from nature also invites you to slow down. Slowness is not laziness, it's accuracy. It allows you to feel instead of react, to notice instead of assume, to respond instead of control. This doesn't mean you stop taking action. It means your action becomes more effective, more rooted, less frantic. You act from center, not from fear. Nature never rushes its growth. When you learn to trust your own pace, your own unfolding, you stop measuring yourself by someone else's timeline. You stop thinking you're behind just because you're resting. You begin to see that integration often happens in the quiet, in the pauses, in the spaces between effort. That insight alone can change the way you heal, the way you create, the way you live. Connection to nature can also be a reset for the nervous system. Just being near trees, water, or open sky reminds the body of something ancient. It pulls you out of thought and into sensation, out of loops and into presence. Even if you can't always be in wild places, tuning into natural rhythms, sunrise, moon cycles, weather brings you closer to the part of you that remembers how to simply be. This kind of attention trains acceptance. When you observe nature long enough, you begin to mirror it. You start letting things end when they need to end. You start honoring what's alive without needing it to last forever. You stop fighting mess and start recognizing it as part of a larger pattern, one that doesn't always make sense at first, but eventually reveals its shape. There's wisdom in how nature makes room for everything. Death, decay, renewal. Nothing is excluded. Even rot has purpose. Even silence has weight. When you stop trying to edit your experience into something more comfortable, you begin to feel held by something bigger, not controlled, not saved, but held by the same intelligence that grows forests and moves tides and repairs ecosystems. That intelligence lives in you, too. Your body knows how to regulate, your heart knows how to grieve, your spirit knows how to return. You don't always need to figure it out. You need to make space for what's already unfolding. The more you learn from nature, the more you begin to trust your own rhythms. The need to fix becomes the ability to feel. The need to manage becomes the capacity to meet. The need to understand becomes the willingness to experience. You're not separate from nature. You are nature, with thoughts, with consciousness, but also with seasons, instincts, and internal weather. When you treat your process like a force to be controlled, you break your own rhythm. When you treat your process like a living system, you begin to grow in the way that only truth allows. Acceptance, at its core, is not resignation. It's participation. It's choosing to show up for life, even when it doesn't go according to plan. Nature never gives up, it just continues. It adjusts, it regenerates, and when you align with that, you stop looking for peace. You start becoming it, without effort, without perfection, just presence, repeated. That's what nature teaches best, how to belong to life not by fixing it, but by flowing with it. And the more you listen, the more you realize that wisdom has been in you the whole time. There's a quiet clarity that comes when you stop fighting reality and start working with it. Nature teaches this without speaking. It moves, adjusts, lets go, renews, and in that movement you begin to understand that peace isn't the absence of challenge, it's how you meet it. But what happens when what you're facing isn't a personal discomfort or internal resistance, but something that's deeply wrong? What do you do when peace meets injustice? When acceptance risks sounding like permission? This is where many get stuck, where values and reality collide. It's one thing to accept a missed opportunity or an uncontrollable change. It's another to face harm, cruelty, exploitation, and still talk about acceptance. Here, the word itself starts to feel dangerous. But true acceptance isn't weakness. It's not surrendering your voice or your values. It's the ability to see clearly what is happening without denial, without emotional collapse, and still respond with purpose. It means refusing to waste energy resisting the fact that something is, so you can put that energy into deciding what to do about it. This requires a split-level awareness, the ability to name what's wrong, to stand against it, and yet not let it harden your heart or consume your peace. That's a paradox most people aren't taught to hold. Either they collapse into helplessness or they react with unprocessed rage. But real strength lives in the middle, where you see injustice clearly, feel its weight fully, and still stay anchored in yourself. That's the power of accepting without approving. To do this, you must first separate the event from the emotional distortion that often follows. Something wrong happens, you witness cruelty, discrimination, deceit. Your first response might be fury or grief. These feelings are valid. But what often comes next is personalizing the pain, believing the world is doomed, that nothing you do matters, that people are mostly broken. This is where suffering compounds. This is where reactivity can take the wheel. Acceptance here is the act of seeing the truth clearly, without exaggerating it or collapsing into despair. Acceptance says, this happened, it should not have, and yet it did. That one sentence holds space for both truth and action. It doesn't 39 numb you. It sharpens your clarity. You stop wasting time wishing the world were different and start facing how it actually is, so you can engage it with intention, not just outrage. Many people confuse acceptance with approval because they haven't learned to sit with emotional contradiction. You can hate something and still accept that it's real. You can disapprove of injustice and still recognize that denying its existence only delays your ability to respond. Without acceptance, you stay in shock, in fantasy, in moral paralysis. With acceptance, you step into discernment. You start asking deeper questions. What needs to be done? What's in my power? How do I protect my peace while staying engaged? This kind of awareness begins with boundaries, not just external, but internal. When you witness injustice, your nervous system absorbs it. You may feel helpless or enraged. You may want to act immediately, fix everything, say everything. But action without regulation often creates more harm than good. Emotional clarity gives you the space to respond instead of explode. It lets you say no with focus instead of fury. Anger itself is not wrong. It's a natural response to violation. But when it's fueled by unprocessed fear, it becomes reactive, scattered, often misplaced. Acceptance helps you ground your anger. It lets you feel it fully without being ruled by it. From there, your anger becomes fuel for boundaries, for truth, for change, not for destruction. Accepting injustice doesn't mean staying silent. It means grounding yourself so your voice carries weight. A reactive voice shouts and burns out. A rooted voice speaks with depth and moves others. This doesn't mean you won't tremble. It doesn't mean you won't cry. But your actions won't be driven by panic. They'll be anchored in clarity. That makes your resistance sustainable. You also start to realize that injustice lives on many levels. Some of it is systemic, some of it is interpersonal, some of it is internalized. Acceptance helps you see where each thread connects. It allows you to acknowledge the grief that comes with witnessing a world that often fails to honor dignity and fairness without turning that grief into apathy or blame. Apathy is the absence of feeling. Blame is the projection of pain. Acceptance is the presence of both without attachment. This practice also reveals how often your own peace depends on trying to control the actions of others. When someone lies, cheats, harms, or takes without care, your peace shatters, not just because of what happened, but because you expected them to be different. Acceptance does not excuse harm. It simply removes the illusion that others are always going to match your standards. It allows you to adjust your expectations without lowering your values. You still speak up. You still hold the line, but you stop expecting people to behave in ways they haven't yet learned. You meet them where they are, not where you hoped they'd be. That shift doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. You stop wasting energy wishing people were better and start deciding how to protect yourself, how to engage wisely, how to move forward. You start to build a life that honors your integrity without needing the world around you to validate it. Acceptance also softens the edge of moral perfectionism, the belief that unless you solve everything, you've failed. This kind of pressure often leads to burnout. Acceptance reminds you that you're one part of a larger process, that your work, your voice, your boundaries matter, even if they don't fix everything. You stop measuring impact by results and start measuring it by alignment. Am I living in line with my values? Am I responding with care, with strength, with clarity? That becomes the compass. Injustice often triggers deep feelings of powerlessness. Acceptance helps you separate what's yours to carry from what isn't. You're allowed to care deeply and still not be able to fix it all. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to heal while the world is still broken. This is not abandonment, it's wisdom. ACT's not. Regulated person can do more for justice than a reactive one who burns out and disappears. Taking care of yourself is not selfish, it's strategic. When you begin to hold this paradox of loving a world that disappoints you, you become someone who resists from a grounded place. You're no longer reacting just to feel better. You're responding because it's what integrity calls for. You don't need to prove your goodness through outrage. You begin to trust your inner compass. And that trust allows you to say no more often, more clearly, with less noise. This trust also gives you the capacity to see nuance. Not every situation is black and white. Not every person is villain or victim. Acceptance helps you sit in the gray, not to excuse harm, but to understand it. From understanding, you create deeper solutions. From understanding, you become more effective, more thoughtful, more consistent in how you engage. That's how movements grow, not just through volume, but through vision, not just through passion, but through presence. Acceptance gives you both. It removes the false comfort of denial and the draining grip of helplessness. It places you back in your body, in your truth, in your agency. Peace and resistance are not opposites. They are partners. One sustains the other. Without peace, resistance burns out. Without resistance, peace becomes complacency. You need both the fire and the stillness, the protest and the pause, the voice that says this is not okay, and the breath that says I can still be okay, even while I face it. This is the paradox of accepting without approving. It's difficult. It requires inner work, emotional honesty, and spiritual depth. But it's also freeing, because once you understand that peace isn't found in a perfect world, but in how you meet an imperfect one, you stop waiting to feel whole. You start becoming it. One clear breath, one strong no, one anchored truth at a time. And that is how you stay human, even when the world forgets to be. Standing for what's right while staying grounded in peace is a rare balance. It asks you to hold complexity without collapsing into reaction, to see the world's mess without letting it harden you. But the truth is, your ability to meet injustice with clarity and compassion starts with how you meet yourself. Because the conflict out there often reflects the conflict within. When you, 39, at war with your own pain, your own history, your own unwanted traits, the world becomes another battlefield. Acceptance, then, must turn inward, not only to the parts you're proud of, but to the parts you hide, the ones you judge, the ones you push away. This is the work of shadow integration. The shadow is everything about yourself that you've disowned, the traits you don't want to admit, the thoughts you deny having, the feelings you label as wrong. It's not evil, it's unaccepted. It's the fear you hide under competence, the anger buried beneath politeness, the envy that lives under fake encouragement. These parts don't go away just because you pretend they're not there. They show up indirectly in projections, in defensiveness, in the patterns you can't seem to break. They speak through sabotage, silence, and overreaction. And the more you avoid them, the more power they hold. Accepting your shadow isn't about indulging it, it's about understanding it. Every disowned part of you once served a purpose. Maybe you were punished for showing emotion, so you learned to stay distant. Maybe you were ridiculed for expressing anger, so you shoved it down. Maybe you grew up being told you had to be the good one, the strong one, the quiet one. So the rest of you got exiled, not because it was bad, but because it wasn't safe. Shadow work begins by becoming aware of these parts, not just intellectually, but emotionally. It's one thing to know you avoid confrontation. It's another to feel the fear underneath it, the memory of being shamed, the belief that love will disappear if you speak up, the story that says your value comes from being easy, agreeable, nice. These aren't flaws, they're protections. They helped you survive. But now, they're limiting you. One of the most powerful tools in shadow integration is projection awareness. When someone irritates you not mildly, but intensely, that reaction often points to something unresolved in you. Maybe it's a trait you've rejected in yourself. Maybe it's an unmet need. When you feel the urge to judge someone harshly, pause, ask, what part of me feels threatened right now? What am I seeing in them that I haven't allowed myself to be? This isn't about blaming yourself for others' behavior. It's about taking back your energy. When you own your shadow, you stop needing to control other people. You stop expecting the world to mirror only the parts of you that you've accepted. You become more curious, less reactive, more open, less defensive. That's real emotional freedom. The shadow also holds your unlived potential, not just your pain, but your power. Traits like confidence, sensuality, ambition, assertiveness. If you were taught those made you selfish, arrogant, or unworthy of love, you may have buried them. But they don't disappear. They wait. They leak out sideways. Or they turn into envy, bitterness, self-sabotage. Owning your shadow means reclaiming these capacities. Saying, I am allowed to want. I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to have boundaries. This doesn't make me bad. It makes me whole. Wholeness is not perfection. It's integration. It means you stop splitting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You start holding all of you with honesty and care. That doesn't mean you act on every impulse. It means you recognize them, understand them, and choose from awareness rather than avoidance. The more you accept your inner world, the less you react to the outer one. This work is uncomfortable. It asks you to look at things you've spent years avoiding, the jealousy you feel toward people who live more freely, the resentment you hold toward someone who never acknowledged your pain, the self-pity you mask as strength. None of these are wrong. They're just unspoken. And when you speak them, even just to yourself, they soften. They lose their grip. Self-judgment is often what keeps the shadow locked in place. You tell yourself you should be past this, that you're too grown to feel this way, that your pain is not valid because others have had it worse. But growth doesn't 39 come from guilt. It comes from gentle honesty, saying, this is still in me, it hurts, I want to understand it. That approach transforms shame into self-awareness. Another key part of integration is recognizing your masks, the roles you play to avoid rejection, the identities that feel safe but also small. Maybe you're the overachiever, hiding your fear of being average. Maybe you're the helper, afraid to ask for anything yourself. Maybe you're the comedian, covering your sadness with sarcasm. These roles are not fake, they're partial. Shadow work invites you to expand, to let more of you be seen, even when it risks not being approved of. The shadow also includes your unmet needs, the hunger for attention, for validation, for being held. These needs aren't immature, they're human. When you don't acknowledge them, they run your life from underneath. You attach to people who mirror your pain. You chase success, hoping it will fill the silence inside. You overgive, hoping someone will finally give back. But when you start naming these needs clearly, without shame, you stop manipulating others to meet them. You start meeting yourself. Inner conflict begins to dissolve when you stop punishing yourself for being human. The goal isn't to never feel rage, insecurity, or sadness. The goal is to stop pretending those emotions make you unworthy. You can feel deeply and still be grounded. You can carry darkness and still be light. That duality is not a flaw, it's the truth of being alive. Relationships become more honest when you do this work. You stop expecting others to hold what you've rejected. You stop projecting your shadow onto your partner, your boss, your friend. You recognize your triggers as invitations, not threats. And you start choosing connection based on truth, not just comfort. Shadow integration also makes you more compassionate. Not in a performative way, but in a real, felt way. Because once you see your own mess clearly and hold it with care, it becomes harder to judge others for theirs. You don't excuse harm, but you see where it comes from, and that clarity makes your boundaries stronger, not weaker. You no longer need to punish others to feel powerful. You know who you are, and you act from that knowing. This process doesn't have a finish line. New layers of shadow will appear as you grow. That's not failure. That's evolution. Every time you meet a new edge, a fear, a pattern, a wound, you have another chance to choose integration, to stop hiding, to bring more of yourself into the light. The beauty of this work is that it builds self-trust. When you stop running from your inner world, you start trusting that you can handle anything that shows up. You're not scared of being triggered because you know how to explore the trigger. You're not scared of being misunderstood because you're not performing for acceptance. You're not scared of the unknown because you're in relationship with all parts of you, not just the ones that look good. True peace comes from this kind of intimacy with yourself, not because you've resolved every issue, but because you've stopped needing to hide them. Your presence becomes more grounded. Your choices become more aligned. You live from truth, not fear, and that truth holds you even when the world doesn't. So when life gets loud, when others reject you, when parts of you rise up that feel hard to love, meet them, not with judgment, not with shame, but with honesty, curiosity, a willingness to listen. That is the work of shadow integration. That is what makes you whole. Not polished, not perfect, just real, just here, just human fully. The moment you stop hiding from your own shadow, something shifts. You feel more real, more grounded. You, 39, no longer wasting energy pretending. You, 39, no longer at war with yourself. But after facing what? 39, been buried inside. There, 39, another layer of truth that quietly waits to be accepted. Your limits, The parts of life you can't stretch, outrun, or bend into something else. These aren't flaws. They're the shape of your life, and how you meet them determines what kind of life you build. Most people try to escape limits. They treat them like cages, like something to push against. Always needing more time, more freedom, more possibility. But endless options don't always lead to more fulfillment. They often create confusion, anxiety, and indecision. Limits, when seen clearly, don't shrink your life. They shape it. They give it definition, edges, focus. They tell you what truly matters. You might believe that joy comes from doing everything, but depth doesn't come from quantity. It comes from attention, from choosing where you want to invest your energy. Constraints help you do that. They remove the noise and bring clarity. When you stop trying to be everything, you can finally be something deeply, honestly, with your whole self. Creativity, too, thrives on limits. Some of the most powerful ideas are born not in total freedom, but in conditions that force you to be resourceful. When you, 39, re-limited in time, space, or tools, your brain works differently. It searches more deeply. It experiments. It adapts. That tension becomes a doorway to discovery. You learn to work with what you have, and in doing so, uncover strengths you didn't know were there. The same is true emotionally. When you accept the limits of what others can give you, you stop begging for validation. You stop chasing emotional promises that never come. That acceptance creates space. You start showing up with more presence, more agency, because you've stopped outsourcing your peace. Your joy becomes something you build, not something you hope others deliver. Limits also teach you timing, that not everything can happen at once, that some things take years, that some doors close, not because you failed, but because they weren't meant for you. Accepting this brings rest to your nervous system. It stops the frantic chase for the life you think you should have. You return to the one you're already living, and you begin to shape it with intention. There is also wisdom in physical limits. The body changes. It has needs, thresholds, a pace it asks you to respect. When you ignore those limits, you burn out, you disconnect. But when you honor them, you find rhythm. You work smarter, not harder. You learn to pause before collapse. That isn't weakness, it's awareness. Even emotional capacity has its limits. You can, 39, hold everything for everyone. You can, 39, solve what isn't yours. When you finally accept this, boundaries become easier. You say no without guilt. You rest without justifying it. You stop measuring your worth by how much you carry. You start protecting your energy as a sacred resource, because it is. Time is one of the clearest constraints we all share. You can't stretch it. You can't hoard it. All you can do is decide how to use it. And when you stop fighting that reality, your priorities sharpen. You begin to focus less on what looks impressive and more on what feels aligned. You stop saying yes to every demand. You let go of obligations rooted in fear, and you start living more on purpose. There's also something deeply grounding about realizing you don't have to master everything. You don't need to be good at every role, every task, every skill. Letting go of that pressure opens you to collaboration, to learning, to asking for help. This builds connection. It softens perfectionism. It reminds you that your value isn't in how much you do, but in how honestly you do it. Limitations also help you recognize enoughness. When you're always reaching for more success, more approval, more progress, you never arrive. But when you accept that not everything is yours to chase, you begin to see what's already here. Gratitude becomes clearer. Peace becomes accessible. You're not waiting to feel worthy. You already are. Even loss, which can feel like the harshest form of limitation, carries a lesson. It strips away illusion. It shows you what can't be forced. It brings you face to face with impermanence. And in that space, you learn to love more fiercely, to speak more clearly, to live more presently. The limit becomes a teacher, not one you asked for, but one that offers depth you couldn't have found on your own. Purpose also becomes more defined when you accept your limits. You stop scattering your energy across every possible path. You choose, you commit, and that commitment doesn't shrink your freedom. It expands your depth. You build meaning not by doing everything, but by doing something with full heart. That kind of alignment brings fulfillment that constant striving never can. Constraints even shape your relationships. You begin to accept that people are who they are, not who you want them to be. You stop trying to change them. You start meeting them as they are, or you step back with love. This removes resentment. It removes the quiet tug-of-war you've been carrying. Peace enters where expectation once ruled. Letting limits guide you also cultivates maturity. You realize you don't need life to bend in your favor to feel okay. You learn to make meaning inside the reality you've been given. That doesn't mean settling. It means working with what's real, choosing to grow where you've been planted rather than waiting for a different garden. There's power in becoming a person who can stay present inside a boundary, who can feel desire and still practice patience, who can want something deeply and still say, "Not now." That kind of inner strength creates trust in yourself. You know you're not ruled by impulse. You know how to live in alignment, even when the moment doesn't give you everything you want. Children are taught that limits are punishment. Adults who've never re-examined that belief carry it with them. But when you begin to see that limits are structure, not shame, your entire relationship with discipline changes. You begin to crave what keeps you anchored. You start building habits that nourish you. You create a life that holds you, rather than one you constantly chase. This is where freedom quietly begins, not when everything is possible, but when the right things are prioritized. When you stop escaping discomfort and start shaping your days with intention, the structure becomes safety. The commitment becomes a container for creativity.